Well, howdy, friends of mine. I'm Joe Cox, the pop marketer, and I'm here to help thinkers and makers like yourself harness the power of popular culture to level up your idea game. Today on the Pop Marketing Podcast, I'm joined by my friend Brendan Shaughnessy, trend hunter and strategy director for New York-based consultancy Sparks and Honey. Part-time stand-up comic and full-time great dude, Brendan shares with us what life is like as a big game cultural trend hunter for hire, working alongside brands like Pepsi, Ford, Facebook, and Hewlett-Packard to unravel the mysteries and those delicious insights that power human culture. We get into our philosophies behind culture's role in what we do, how much time he actually spends on TikTok on a daily basis, why great jokes and great insights have so much in common, and how important it is to get up on stage as many times as possible to hone and craft those professional pondering skills. He even drops a few tips on not going totally insane from drinking from the internet fire hose all day. So without any further ado, here's Brendan Shaughnessy on the Pop Marketing Podcast. Let's go. Whoa, hello everybody, and welcome back to the Pop Marketing Podcast. I'm Joe Cox still, and I live at the crossroads, Brendan, of pop culture and brand strategy. And with me today, I am extremely fortunate, excited to introduce everybody to Brendan Shaughnessy. And Brendan comes to us from New York City, I believe is where you're at this current state.
Currently, yes.
Fresh back from a Easter trip to Florida. And we're talking to you today. You are the strategy director at Sparks and Honey, which is a cultural consultancy out of New York. And a consultancy that puts human and AI-powered intelligence together into a thing they have trademarked called Q, which gets me because I'm a big Star Trek Next Generation fan.
Love it.
And he's coming back. Q's coming back. The news just broke today. So it's kind of a synchronicity, I think, that I'd have you on talking about Sparks and Honey Q at the same time that Q is heading back to Star Trek.
It's important to note that we are not at all affiliated with some of the other more negatively associated Qs, such as QAnon especially. So I'm glad that your mind went directly to Star Trek and not other places. That's going to be a big win for our team.
That's it. You're going after me. Or, I've been watching the HBO series, so I've learned a lot.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot about all kinds of Chans, 2, 4, and 8 Chans, and
none of them are good. Yeah. It's very, very similar to Archer, naming their intelligence unit ISIS, and then, obviously ISIS happening. So either way,
Star Trek, right? Like, that's great.
Go big on it. I love it.
Brendan, what do you say that you do over at Sparks and Honey?
Yeah. Let's just get the elephant in the room out of the way. And that's that I think oftentimes the first thing that, talking about being a cultural consultancy or, even listening to your interview last week with Megan Dexter talking about like futurism, there seems to be like a lot of baggage around like future and trend forecasting around it being this like esoteric way out there principle that doesn't really exist. And in some cases that's very true. We kind of just make up our job on the fly. And but for the most part, I would say like what we're trying to do is understanding culture through emerging consumer behaviors or through emerging brand actions. And I would say the thing that Sparks and Honey does an especially good job of is then quantifying that. So that's where the AI aspect comes in terms of sort of how do we organize and bucket those trends that are taking place so that we understand, what's going into shaping them, who is it impacting, what are the size of those changes that are taking place out in the real world, and then what does that mean for big brands and organizations, or for small brands and organizations, and how do we help them plan for those changes in culture to make sure that we're not getting left behind, but taking advantage of them and growing with those trends as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's got some of that. Anytime you say, hey, I'm a futurist, I'm like, my mind's already clicking. My mind's already, but At the same time, I don't think it's as futurist as it is like I forgot who made it famous, but the nowist,
Yeah.
right? There's too much crap going on to even assume that you're going to predict a 5-year future, right? But you can pick out the things that you could be taking bets on now, or the things that may start shaping that next 5 years. Is that fair?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, at Sparks and Honey, when we look at trends, we quantify those. Are these a mega or macro or a micro trend? So all of those things have implications that might be something that's taking place today versus something that's going to fully grow 2 to 3 years from now versus something that we're not going to see the legs of 10 years from now. So to say that everything is future looking way down the line or way down the road, that's certainly not the case. It's how do we then act on these things today, or build strategies, or campaigns, or products, or whatever it might be, in a reactionary form or in a predictive form, to make sure again that we're getting ahead of them, or staying at least at pace with them as fast as things are moving.
So it's probably tough to say like, hey, in the day to day I do X, but as a strategy director, what's your shtick at Sparks and Honey? Like, what does it look like?
Good question. So I will say that I'm one of a handful of strategy directors, and we're essentially tasked with a team of strategists, and we're working against a number of either like most strategy groups, a myriad of project based relationships, or container based relationships. Regardless of that, what we're doing is we're constantly looking at culture, and we're applying that for a different project. So we do that in a couple different ways, right? We have our product queue, which is essentially the best way I can describe it. I have to provide a little bit of history to Sparks and Honey, and sort of how we came about creating this thing that sizes culture. So, pre me, I'll just take credit for all the great work that took place 10 years ago at
Please.
Sparks and Honey. Like many, I think, agencies that are trying to think of, how do we think about, and how do we build a practice around culture. We were very much kind of pigeonholed in sort of the social media, like how do we look at these emerging things on social media, and apply them to brand action. So in doing that, I think it was sort of a qualitatively and quantitatively developed, what are the big trends in culture, whether that be sustainability, or at the time 10 years ago, those conversations looked very different, mobile connectivity, whatever they might have been. So looking at some of the more commonly surfaced topics that are taking place in culture, and seeing again, how do we monitor these over time? How do they grow? Um, where we're at now is we're trying to move further and further kind of upstream, and working with more C-suite leadership, of saying, how do we apply these things, and actually how do we use data, and in a bigger way, to inform what these things are, beyond just saying culturally these are some things that we're seeing, and going beyond consumer surveys. So we created a taxonomy, what we call the elements of culture, and it's these, again, it's a comprised of what we've identified as some of the biggest trends. It's 160 plus, sort of our original 151 Pokemon, of the biggest trends that we're seeing on a given basis. And we collect data from signals, whether those be articles, or patents, or investment data, any sort of data, and social data, and cramming that in, and then tagging it against these 150 trends, to identify, okay, what are the things that are popping on a given basis, and what industries is that impacting, and what are the implications of certain trends rising or falling at a given day, or moment, or month over month. So what that allows us to do is then take some of these bigger questions, like the future of an industry, or the future of a product, and understand which trends are tagged to your category, or to your company, and how do we understand how those trends might be impacting you, and then again, thinking about how those are changing, using the AI behind that, to then understand the level of reach that might be associated with the trend. How many people is this affecting? How has it grown month over month? What kind of consumers is it impacting? So that we can then help brands create plans for understanding the exposure to certain trends over time. So from a day-to-day basis, I'm sort of blending the generalist or strategist of getting in and doing a lot of research, and exposing myself to those signals, which I think is pretty common for most strategists. But then it's about understanding and identifying those patterns over time, and digging into them to understand, again, how do I build proactive and preventative, if you will, plans for potential emerging trends that are impacting these businesses we're working with. So the short answer to that is I spend a lot of time in Google and Keynote.
I was waiting for it. My question was gonna be like, how many trends do you think, or how much time do you spend on TikTok just to one up everybody, just to get, the hottest
I mean,
trend?
the thing that we haven't talked about is whether or not we could just sit, a full 40 hours on our timesheets on TikTok and learn just as much. And the answer very well might be that is true. So maybe worth at least testing the alternative
I'm
option to seeing if we can, move our work stream that direction.
I have started testing already. I'm a good 20 hours in this week already, so I'll let you know.
Wow. It's only
I'll
Monday,
let
so
you
I'm
know.
impressed. Color me impressed.
Yeah, why do you think brands get? I mean, they want it badly. Brands, marketers want to know. A lot of it is product. Like I know your background when we worked together was more on the brand side when it comes to marketing, but I assume where you're at now, it's products. Finding opportunities for new products, finding opportunities for investments. All kinds of different things could come out of this. Has there been anything that's surprised you in that way, like how brands are utilizing these? Now that when you jumped over from, hey, it's all about the marketing side of stuff and what kind of ads or content that we make to, different usages of it.
Yeah, I think in some ways it's kind of fear driven, right? Like in a lot of cases, a lot of briefs that we get are the future of blank. And that blank often tends to be things that, are sort of surprising when it's actually quite literally, the product or the field or something that sits really close to home. So it's saying, how does our business need to not just adapt to keep up with these trends, but how do we need to completely reinvent what we're doing to make sure that 10 years from now, we're thinking about sustainability in a way that is literally inspiring the products we create. How do we think about DEI in a way that ensures that like the people that we are bringing in the fold are completely represented and accepted, and not as a marketing ploy to bring in people. So I think that's been one of the, I think, maybe bigger surprises is our work is it carries a lot of weight, and it's sort of a high risk, high rewards sort of trade off, in that oftentimes that big organizations really don't know how to approach really complex questions, so they send that out to a lot of different agencies or a lot of different people, and look for a lot of different ways in. So I think when it comes to pop culture in general, like we're looking for solutions that I'm sure you know this super well, talking about it on your podcast all the time, but it's sort of that intersection of things that are really fringe, but also like all of a sudden, like you understand immediately that they've got legs. So how do we help identify fringe in a way that doesn't sound like it's out of left field or doesn't sound like it's too out of reach for a brand, but make it feel attainable, and then build a path towards whatever that plan is. And I think that's what trend spotting is about. It's about understanding future realities and then having the wherewithal to plan for it, and build that responsiveness into everything, like whether that's brand communications or product development or research and development, whatever that might be. So that's if we could figure out the how to identify those fringeness aspects of something that just inherently you understand, wow, this is something that's going to be something that's inherently ownable and also inherently unique. How do we help steer brands more towards those sort of things that clicks immediately?
Yeah, it's taken me a while to figure out what my kind of overall point of view is on popular culture, but it's really close to that. It's, we hunt in the fringes ish, but not too far out in the fringes or people can't connect with it, right? And in the marketing world or in the advertising world, it's pretty simple. Our jobs, a lot of times, especially for the kind of modern CMO or whoever it is to find those things that are just enough on the fringe to be interesting, but still connected to things and people in a way that they're known, and then find them. And we're kind of like the boat guy on the river Styx, right? Like we are taking something that's super cool and has energy, right? Like has a ton of energy. Like that's where the energy comes from, and we're driving it across into mainstream. Like once brands get a hold of it, right? Like it's toast. But it
It's
is
gone. Kiss it
just
goodbye. Right.
it is not whether that's good or bad. The idea is that is the life. That is it. That's the journey of these things is they get pulled, their energy gets taken, and we ride them across to the world of the every person, right, to the mainstream. And once it hits mainstream, it doesn't have the energy anymore, and we're looking for that energy elsewhere. So it makes a ton of sense uh, in how you are thinking of it and where you find those opportunities in the somewhat fringe, but not too far out, not too far out fringe. What is, how much does popular culture have? How much does popular culture play in the things that tend to trend, these days?
Well, I think pop culture is sort of a perfect example of when we look at like again our from a Sparks and Honey perspective, looking at all these trends. Each of these trends is interesting in isolation, but like where things start to get to really become more compelling is when you stack them on top of each other. And I think if you look at major pop cultural phenomenon, like right, those things are tied not just to a single trend, but sort of an intersection of those trends stacking on top of each other. So I think first of all, being able to understand pop culture, like that's not only like a single component, like that's your language, right? That's the ways in which you navigate, insights or ways of which landing on understanding why things are happening or why behaviors are happening. Um, uh, you sent me a note earlier last week that was just asking about what sparked your mind in pop culture recently, and the first thing that came to mind was the cinnamon toast crunch, you know, debacle, explosion that went on Twitter the last couple of weeks, and I think like that's a perfect example of a cultural trend stacking that resulted in some sort of viral moment, if you will, of looking at like nostalgia as a trend and finding out that this guy who found shrimp tails in his cinnamon toast crunch like also has a connection back to Topanga from a 90s show, looking at the sort of rise of like distrust and misinformation about like people inherently not trusting brands and assuming, right, that this guy who found shrimp tails is inherently right. uh, there was just like the perfect swarm of like different things happening all around a single cultural moment. And I think it was completely fueled by like people's interest in pop culture in general. And I think that looking at those sort of moments in general, um, you can almost work backwards from understanding like all the different trends that go into a moment or that lead us to this point in culture. And that's sort of our job, right, is to work backwards from these client briefs too and say, well, what are those forces that are impacting it? What are the pieces that are there, and what are the languages, or what are the whether it's social mentions or certain other inputs to say, well, here's how we got there, and here's what we can learn from it, and here's what we need to do to react from it. So I think it's critical to answer your question again in a short piece.
Yeah, I mean I love it. I love the idea of the stacking, right? Because you really you can start to take one piece and say, hey, this is because of this sort of trend, or this is kind of why it went viral, right? That not I can make it go viral, because those are two very, very different things. But here are the reasons why this is percolating, right? Like these are it. And for that one, yeah, the Topanga weirdness just kept it going, right? It keeps steam going into
Right. It's
something that
fire.
might
Yeah.
not have lasted that long, gives it some extra energy. inside of that, and that's a really weird one that I haven't really kept caught up on. I was like, I should probably get a newsletter out on that one, but you kind of got to learn. Like sometimes you miss them, and you just got to wait for the next one, next one to come around. So, cinnamon toast crunch. I think it's done. Um, I
Well, I mean, like back to your point, it's not about virality, but like, what is it about? In this case, I think it's more about like, what's the, how do we go and understand like the clarity of the situation? And in order to do that, like, there's a lot of things we've got to kind of peel apart. And I think that's what I was trying to make with this like trend stacking thing is how can we understand like a cultural moment like that, or a pop cultural moment, and how do we peel apart the layers that led us to that point? And at the end of the day, it had nothing to do with virality or with somebody trying to make that moment happen. It just did. Look at the skateboard guy on TikTok with the ocean spray. Like, that wasn't a thing that was like intentionally trying to happen. It was just something that did happen. If you look at, like, again, nostalgia being a kind of key trend, I think, of what's been going on in the last year of the pandemic, giving kind of Fleetwood Mac the kind of perfect vibe and ambiance of everything that made that video great, in addition to him just being an interesting person and a really weird view. Like, all of a sudden that became like a moment that everyone wanted to root for. And like, all of a sudden now it does provide an entrance for a brand like Ocean Spray to do something about. So I'm really excited that kind of incident to see what they continue to do with it, because that's a brand that, like, Ocean Spray being a pandemic brand that was going to get a win, was not one that I had going in last March. So
Me either. Like I had some diet cranberry, cran raspberry in the fridge, but I couldn't have called it. But I don't. I think that's part of it, right? Like, it's not really telling the brands how to go viral as much as it is you're living in a world with so much stuff. What happens when like pop culture comes to you, right? Like, what happens whenever that opportunity strikes, and what are you going to do? Like, how you can't sit on your hands for 2 weeks or it's gone, right? So like, what do you know the context of what's really going on, or do you just think you know what's going on the weird world of the internet, and how should you respond to that? Ocean
yeah,
spray.
in that regards, I think that's a lot of like, what's fast culture. So those are the things that we can maybe get smarter on, or plan on. And in that regard, like, the ocean spray example is a perfect example of fast culture. And now I think the other piece that, like, a lot of brands again are more fearful of is that slow culture. What are the things that have been bubbling? Maybe a lot quieter for a long time, that are starting to come to the forefront now. I think about sustainability, or DEI being some of these, slower but longer tail trends that have been, it's not like any of these things are new, but we're treating them with new levels of assertion or energy based on certain cultural moments, in this case, COVID, that have taken place, and amplified them too. So I think it's about, building a plan, or balance for fast culture and slow culture, and having a perspective on how both are impacting your organization all the time. Because you're not everyone's gonna get an ocean spray moment, so it'd be silly to assume that we've got a plan for only those ocean spray type phenomenon, I suppose.
Right on. So you live on kind of in a world of, I mean, you're in the strategic world up top, which means, especially in your thing, you probably don't see a lot of stuff get into fruition, right? Like, how do you handle that being a creator and a person, and those ideas, you're in this world of ideas and how culture is going, but how do you keep yourself grounded? Because especially through 2020, it's social media in general was tough. A lot of the inputs for us were tough mentally. How is your media diet these days?
Oh man, I think it's a tough challenge working in a more consulting role, to because you're right. Like I mentioned earlier, I spend way more time making Google Slides, or keynotes, than I do making, or seeing anything go beyond that. So I think it's about figuring out what your outputs actually do look like, and maybe that's not actually a thing that goes out in the world, or whatever that might be. I mean, like, one thing that I've been really proud of is that, like, I brought some recommendations that led into a larger global study that the brand went and did based on the insights that we were able to provide. Or we work with a lot of other agencies in our holding company. So how do we help inform them with smarter targeting or smarter, again, strategic recommendations that shape the brief that then shape the output of those things. So when the output is only decks, you do have to think about, again, how is my value being seen? And I think that is something that's probably healthy for us all to do in advertising and marketing in general, is finding that beyond just the outputs of ads or products or whatever, because at the end of the day, like, all of us have so much more input on the work that we do. And, I have so many dead ideas that have never gone anywhere that are also kind of worth celebrating. So in whatever way you do that, that's something that I've been trying to do. But also, like, I've become a really good keynote designer. So maybe I do see the keynotes as like pieces of work in the world that I'm proud of as well. So I don't know.
Yeah, I do too. I'm with you. I think something that's really interesting that people can check out. And are you guys still doing the culture briefings
Oh
now
yeah,
that
that's a great point. So yeah, maybe yeah, Joe, you're right. I mean, so
I wasn't heard hunting for an answer.
no,
That was not it. No,
well,
you're totally right. Decks are that is totally my like that's the creative side, as is pop marketer in general, and the thing that you and I are doing. And something I wanted to bring up a bit later too is like you're kind of hop into the comedy world, and different things outside of consultancy. But
you're teaming me up with
the
all sorts of good things to talk about. Maybe that's why
I
you
can't
host a
help myself.
podcast. Yeah.
I
Nope.
can't help it.
Well,
Cultural briefings. I would love to hear about where those kind of spring up from. And then if nobody has seen a cultural briefing from Sparks and Honey, the ones pre-pandemic and the before times, I would put them as like a really classy TMZ episode, like it felt like there was some people, the kind of leaders that would have their cups of coffee or whatever they would have. And then it would be kind of all of these tons of other strategists and thinkers out in the crowd, like asking questions and adding to kind of those 110 trends you were talking about. It was a very interesting.
yeah, it's something that, just some additional context. The daily culture briefing is something that, well, again, was sort of core to the component or the DNA of Sparks and Honey from the get go. We 3 times a week have shut down over lunch, and we have a session on our platform on Q. And we have 2 briefers and a panel. And like you said, the room typically used to be full with people that would contribute to the conversation too. So all of those things are what's essentially been going on in culture in the last 24 hours. And we'll do sort of just horizontal roundtables of things that have been going on in the world and how that ties back to cultural different trends and cultural events. And then the other aspect is how does that maybe impact certain industries. So we do like deep dives on, how is this affecting like the future of mobility, and thinking about like infrastructure or automobiles, and how do we then tie in other clients to join that conversation too. So the thing that I think you kind of tease this up perfectly is, in addition to like the work that we create, like just literally the words that we share is also, like, I think a lot of our outputs in terms of creative in the world too. Like, not all ads are right or are going to work, but like we make those things. Not all the things, the recommendations or insights that we provide are right, but like I think just even the act of presenting them on a daily basis and practicing that, yeah, again, like building on things that are going out in the world from a cultural perspective, like you're right. That's absolutely something that I'm proud of, is just like words spoken out into the world is things that we should continue to practice. And again, from a practice perspective, like no other agency that I'm aware of has dedicated the time of doing it on a daily basis for an hour of potentially billable time. And the output is that, from an internal perspective, we at Sparks and Honey get to know, other projects that strategists are working on or building on. And, maybe I can throw something on your project with a comment that I've got based on, something that I'm working on. So it brings us together from an internal perspective. There's a lot of educational components of just like, again, bringing the outside into a single kind of session. And it's a super iterative and collaborative kind of environment. But then also that results in I think more interesting work too for our clients. So it makes TMZ is the right comparison because it makes us feel like we're constantly on and having to be tapped in. And not all of that has to come from just our own digging. That can come from outside contributors that are joining the session. That can come from panel members. That can come from anybody. So it's a great sort of way to plus up our own collective hive mind, I suppose. Pun definitely intended with the whole honey thing. So
Sure, sure. Well done. Yeah, I am totally down and understate. And I there's a lot of respect for the practice because it is traditionally strategy is a very in the marketing or advertising world is pretty out on an island, uh, lonely position in a lot of times, and it is tough to get outside point of view. Right, it's tough to find the time a lot of times to like get ideas from other places, which is what ideas are, right? From making connections that haven't been made before. And you need a lot of different ideas to make that kind of happen from all over the place. So it's super cool. And I dig that. Are those still going on and can anybody check them out whenever they're happening? Because you used to stream them and it was a hell of a, it was a hell of a like studio setup, a lot of space there for New York. So
yeah,
pretty cool.
there's
Do those still go? Are they still going on?
they're still going on. We do them remotely, so we plug in. I was actually interested to see what platform you'd be using for this because we have a similar sort of format with online version now. So you can watch them sparksandhoney.com, go to our briefings page, and we stream them on YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook. But it's just remote, so it's like this, and we'll still. I think the benefit for us in that regard is even though we're apart, it's still sort of a always on visibility piece for our agency group. So we tune in and we're still able to like again kind of collaborate in real time and understand what's going on. But yes, whenever we do go back, we will have a brand new studio that'll be even sexier and even cooler. So you can watch now at any time and have sort of more virtual environments. But again, thinking of like the future of work, our end goal is to say, how do we bring in the best of both worlds and have digital guests. I'll phone you in from Kansas City, a perfect example of someone who's got expertise that's outside the geographical area. How do we layer in these more hybrid work models? That's sort of one of our other big topics that we're talking about from an agency-wide perspective is the future of work. And I think balancing those hybrid technologies and into a single place is going to be not just a Sparks and Honey thing to figure out, but that's going to be like the question of 2022, I think. So definitely join in the interim at least if you'd like to continue the conversation.
Yeah, it's I would totally tell everyone it is worth their time to do so because A, it's free, and B, again, we're all at home and it's made that kind of, a thinker mind or a pondering mind. It's a little tough to get outside your purview, and you can only read so many newsletters, right? Like you can only, I mean, thank the gods for people that curate, that help me curate the fire hose, but this is it's a great way to kind of tune in, and especially digging like the last 24 hours, right? It's kind of some way that makes it more palatable than trying to troll through your Twitter stream to curate that amongst the other grenades waiting for you
Well,
there.
and I think a lot of times people or clients we work with, especially like at first glance, they're like, how does some of the things that you would see like in your Twitter feed have anything to do with business implications of me or my brand? But I think again, I think one of the practices of the culture briefing is showing and demonstrating that pretty much all of the things that we talk about have direct connection to either a larger cultural trend that's taking place that's going to have direct implications to all kind of brands or companies we work with, or it's going to be something that's really specific that, regardless of what you're doing, you're going to have learnings from another industry. So, pop culture in general is sort of again, all of those things have cultural learnings and consumer learnings. And I think that's what maybe one demonstration of how we all do a better job of proving it out is just talking about it more often and again, kind of showing the homework that brings us to direct applicability to different brands, and not allowing them to kind of dismiss those. Maybe something that might be something small and silly actually has, a larger, broader cultural change on the way.
They're my favorite. The silliest of things are my favorite. The deepest.
The
The
dumbest.
dumbest are usually pretty fairly. You can bet on there being something very human underneath.
One great example was the last year. There was a Facebook group of people that were pretending to be ants, and like that was literally people would just comment as if they were ants in a Facebook group, seemingly stupid and ridiculous. But it was, I think, one instance of like so many different other examples of people turning to online mediums and platforms to find senses of community during the pandemic. And that could be something really important, like bonding through, larger, parenthood or, professions. But like, just sometimes like we just need to pretend to be ants, and like we just need some form of escape, and finding connection and also escape in the same time. Like, that was something that Facebook, I think, did a really good job of like running with last year as like a really silly thing that had, really serious and impactful cultural undertones of the things that we need don't always have to be serious. They can be small and stupid and silly, which again, I'm all here for. So
Yeah, I think my favorite was the beer chugging Facebook group. It might have been more Midwest, but it was pretty hot and heavy through April of last year. Was just a lot of people just chugging beers in different places, and there was something simple and very connecting about that. As many other things we learned over 2020, learned a whole lot about humans. What Right, 100%,
myself included.
100%, right there with you. Uh, I'd kind of kicked into it a little bit, but I think one of my favorite ideas on strategy is and insights is how close it kind of mirrors a really good strategy and a really good insight is that of like a really good joke,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Like I find them exactly the same. It's that thing that everyone's looking over here, but no one, and there's an obvious thing, but no one's called it out yet. And whenever somebody calls it out, it's one of those things where you're like, oh my God, I thought I was the only person. Or that's completely it. It's that obvious thing
For sure.
that's tough to, the more we try to quantify it, the harder it is to hold on to. But I know that you got up on stage a couple times. I haven't talked to you for a while. How did that go? What was behind you hopping up and giving stand up a try?
It's something I've always kind of just wanted to do, and I love, much like in most of my meetings, I love like just generally presenting and just talking. I'm sure that's now, very evident after just rambling for the past 45 minutes. But I like,
Good ramble.
yeah, thanks.
It's a hell of a rambler.
Uh,
It's good.
I
It's good.
yeah, we'll see if the audience agrees. But I like, when I moved to New York, I like live like literally 2 blocks from the Comedy Cellar, which is like the go-to place to see comedy. So I was like, I need to sort of, again, sort of embrace the opportunity. And I took a comedy class with Rick Chrome, and I would absolutely recommend it if you want to do stand-up. He's like the guy to go to. But our like first class or whatever, he handed out like a piece of paper, and the whole exercise was writing a premise and a punch. And it was, again, what's the insight behind what you're showing them, and then what is the implication? Again, just like you said, the thing that, something that people is, right in front of their face that they've just never thought to look at from that angle before. So that premise, punch, and like insight to implication is something that I do all the time, just from a brand or consumer behavior. So it's something that I really enjoy doing, again, to when I don't want to think about like the future of canned meats or the future of, insert here. I'd much rather just write a silly joke about, going to the bathroom or whatever it might be. So it's been a bit of a, circling back to your other earlier question, a bit of a lovely way for me to just turn my, Apple Notes ramblings into more polished jokes and insights. But yeah, it's the bad news is that I took the class, and then I Was performing semi-regularly at a comedy club. It was actually the comedy club where they shot the Joker, fun fact. And that comedy club closed forever.
Cool.
So I think that may be either a telltale sign that it's time for me to let the full-time comedians do their gigs, since they've probably had the last year much worse than I. And maybe it's time for me to find a different side hustle. But no, I would love to continue to figure out ways to bring it in, because it is fun, and I think I'm a little bit funny. Definitely would not qualify myself as a comedian though.
I was going to introduce you as one of the funniest guys I've met, but I've figured out that was like, that's a horrible way to that's the
Terrible.
worst way to introduce someone.
Terrible.
For both parties, for everyone involved, for the audience and for yourself. It's like, thanks.
It's no good.
That is good.
And then I would have to they'd be like, oh, so you do comedy? Like, tell me a joke. I'm like, I really don't do it that often. I've done it like a handful of times, but like, they don't want the backstory. They just want jokes. They're like, make me a balloon animal clown. Like, that's what they want. So I can't fulfill that. I don't make very good balloon animals, and I tell below average jokes. So I'm glad. Thanks for saving me.
Yeah, no problem. What I really wanted, I've always wanted, is to have one of those tricks for any kids that you meet in whatever you're doing, or people like that. Like, it's like, I have Mustang Sally is my go-to, like, for karaoke. I was a karaoke DJ. It's a long story, but you got to have one thing that you just crack, that you can just crank. And that's mine. But I was like, I always wanted to be like a coin magic or something.
Yeah.
That is, balloon animals is one of them. Actually, I think it's Seth, not Rogen, because that would be weed. It is Seth Godin, I think, is one that makes balloon animals, I think. And he has them in his pocket all the time, which I think that's again
brilliant.
And I have to, but I can't blow one of those balloons up, brother.
No,
like, it is my lung capacity.
I've got decent lung capacity. It's the twisties that gets me. Also, while
maybe
we're
we
at
should
it,
team up.
Natasha Bedingfield, Unwritten, is my go-to. It's always a crowd pleaser, of all ages.
Please tell me more.
Oh, that's just my karaoke song of choice. If I'm gonna
Unwritten,
yeah.
that is yours.
Yeah, Unwritten.
I have to listen to it. I would love to listen
Joe,
to it.
let me tell you, if I played it for you, you would know. But my backup is Jukebox Hero by Foreigner, so that would probably get you going at least.
You need to kind of have, if it is important to have a couple, because you really do gonna have to have your slow pick and something to bring the crowd up.
Yeah.
But that's a whole other episode. I'd love to bring you back to talk more
great.
about the strategic ideas in karaoke. It's a new world out there. I do. Yeah. Comedy is super interesting, and I rarely get to talk about it to many, but it is interesting too, that it's also a practice. And I think to get good at strategy in general, you got to just do it over and over again. You got to talk over and over again. You got to sell your idea, or you have to present things in a way where they make sense and understand how things work. Understand how, like you said, a premise comes together. And comedians do it every day, right? Like, you just go and you bomb and you cut and you edit and you tighten until it's just like that, tight 10, tight 15 of whatever it is,
right.
Like, really practiced, right? I rarely get that. And I don't think that in the world of, am I right? The world of Sparks and Honey, you're probably not, there's not you don't get a chance for much of a routine.
I've been asked to do stand-up many times at Sparks and Honey, and if anyone does tune into this from Sparks and Honey, I will tell you definitively I will not be doing any stand-up comedy at Sparks and Honey. Doing stand-up in front of coworkers just feels like a terrible idea. So I won't be.
Absolutely.
I won't be.
No, and even drunk. Like, all of those, like, inebriated or not, it sounds like a total nightmare.
Well, I would love to host a drunk roast style version of a daily culture briefing. I think that would be a lot of fun. But again, I don't think that would make the 12 to 1 o'clock Eastern usual streaming time. So If we do it, maybe we can do like an after hours with Joe version of it, sponsored in part due to you, and you can DJ the music.
I really do like that idea of having. I think we're getting into this world where strategists kind of have. There's more out in the open about it. It's been so shaded in weird secrecy for some dumb reason, but it feels like there's more people coming together going, I don't get it. Or can we just open up our can we open up the playbook a bit to each other instead of trying to keep it so close to the chest? And I dig Sparks and Honey for kind of really pushing that practice out to anybody who wants to stay tuned.
Well, we do get to
Um,
practice the tight 15 in presentations all the time. I think, and strategists in general, we just whenever we bomb, it tends to be like in front of like client leadership or our clients, and then like we're the ones that like bombing in that case isn't like, wow, I'm glad we got that out of the way. It was like, okay, time to like hit another you know cool all-nighter for the rest of the weekend. So um, I think I'd rather actually bomb in comedy in that regard.
Well, at least you know there's just going to be another audience, or the ones that can make it know that it's just going to be a different group of people.
It's also true.
And which helps to say like, I don't know these people. I'll never meet these people. Like it's just a dark world room of faceless people. I'll just try it again. But I do think that that's the same with strategy or creativity in general. There's a lot there to say. Got to have a certain. There's a certain kind of strength you got to build up to be able to do that, because we do like to talk a lot about how it's okay to make mistakes, but when any brand makes a mistake,
We don't like to throw that
well,
remedy out there. Yeah, no one's really
like
buying
Burger
that.
King, years and years of doing amazing work, and really, and you know where they stand on things, and then a little setup. They had a premise problem. They had a bad setup, didn't go well, and all of that work seemed to go, immediately to a strange place. It just shows you. It just shows you a little bit about like you kind of are. What have you shown to me lately, right? Like what are you you kind of reset yourself every day in some aspects.
In some ways that's a good thing, because I suppose you can move on and redeem yourself immediately, or at least try to. But I do think that like people are going to remember it, if we're thinking of just the Burger King instance. Like, yeah, people will probably remember it. So how do we move on? What are the other things that we can do to, again, find out, first of all, if wherever it is that they left that goodwill. Go, certainly I think Burger King would pay to figure that out. But it's not to say that brand is dead by any means. It's how do we, again, react in a different way, or how do we build and probably focus on that shortcoming in a different way. So that's pop culture. It's always moving, and the target's always changing. So whether you win or lose, like, you got to get up and try again tomorrow regardless. So might as well try again with a
Yeah,
little more
you
energy.
just have to have somebody at the helm that is able to say like, okay, it was a risk. Risk means risky work, big rewards, bigger losses kind of thing. And some of you can't hit. What's a perfect, like, you can't bat 300? Is that sports
Yeah,
talk? Is that right?
if you baseball's great, because if you only have to get three out of 10, and you're a Hall of Famer or something like that. That's for you, Dad.
Okay, so that's great.
Yeah.
Baseball works. Baseball, I need to look that up. I need to start learning more about baseball. And that's more my style. Cool. Hey, what's going on in your world on pop culture? Have you been reading anything cool? You watched anything? I mean, you've had to have. You've been stuck into a place for a year. What have you been biting with your time? What hobbies have you been getting into?
Hobby wise, I mean, I was doing like fermentation stuff like way before it was cool. So I've been making kombucha and all that, making hot sauce. So from a hobby perspective, and like, I guess, trying to write comedy, but not very successfully, of sending it out in the real world anywhere. I've been doing a lot of biking, and I've been doing a lot of running, because there's not much to do other than that. In terms of content, I really, really like If you like Nathan For You, I've been loving How To with John Wilson on HBO. It tackles like very, you want to talk about like the perfect insight generator. They tackle like really singular, stupid things like scaffolding, and then they go incredibly deep on like scaffolding from a really funny, stupid perspective. So been watching a lot of that, listening to a lot of The Daily and Still Processing on podcasts. Reading, I don't know. I tend to read more articles and newsletters than I do books, but that's mostly because that's just what I do for a living. So I don't know. The Verge.
Yeah, it's hard to keep up with books. I buy them still. I still buy them and put them on, the shelf over that you can't see over here, so I can make sure I look at
Get
them. But I
credit for
no
them.
longer feel bad. I don't feel bad. If I can now pick a book up, read a little bit, and be like, nope, I just can't spend the time. Like I'm hunting for ideas and insights myself on that more so than escapism. Yeah, I think it's okay.
Sometimes I
Like
read books just to make sure that I still know how to read. Like it'll be like it's been a while, and then I'll look at it and I'm like, I'll try to say them out loud, and it's like I'm reading for the first time ever. So I do. I think good news is I did read like a few chapters of a book the other day, and successfully. So yeah, I can also still write cursive if you're curious in that.
Oh God, I cannot. I've given up on that one. And the school system's no longer. They're not worried
No, are
about
they
it.
still playing recorders in third grade in the elementary schools these days?
When I get there, I'll let you know.
Okay,
I
good.
will, and I'll send a note to the teacher
Good deal.
specifically. Can't wait. Well, cool. I have been doing a lot of the same thing, and I do find it interesting how we are so addicted, and not even addicted in a bad way, but like so interested as humans in the thing on the fringe, right? Like the thing just around the corner, and what is it going to be? It feels to be very, very much like the part of what's next is kind of drives a lot of our constant want to improve and innovate at things. So it all makes sense. It's extremely interesting. Where can people find more of you online, sir?
Yeah, you can hit me up on Twitter or LinkedIn. Either way, Brendan Shaughnessy on LinkedIn or at bshaugh Shaughn. The last name's a doozy. So yeah, at bshaugh. I don't have anything to plug. Just mostly working. So if you want to hang out or work or bounce off ideas, that's probably the best place. The only the thing that I will say is just a cultural trend that I'm really interested in and have nowhere to go with. So if you want to bounce ideas off my head, is the future of religion. I think there's a lot of energy for something, whether that's QAnon or even thinking about like just like huge nerds in general, like Comic-Con being an example of like a modern religion. I'm really interested in what is going to replace traditional religion. So maybe that will be my prompt to anyone that wants to talk about weird things going on in culture. If you want to talk about culture or the future of religion, I don't have an answer, but I think there's a lot of money in it. So
Oh, totally. Like it's Scientology. It's perfect. I couldn't leave with a better question asked, right? Like, because I'm sure everyone here has opinions. So go on Twitter.
Go on Twitter.
Please,
Tell me what you think the future of
Brendan know.
religion is. Yeah, that's it. That'll be it. I'll let my parents know as well.
You're pretty close. Yeah, you're pretty close. You're pretty right on though. We will do what we're going to do. We are going to replace it more so. We have to have stories. Some of those stories, I think popular culture has replaced a lot of it. I think we tell stories. I mean, the Avengers is
100%,
and superheroes is all American, baby. Like that is something that's like a lot to do with new stories of mythos and myth, and all that is extremely interesting. And I think
all
I'm going to
underpinned
go.
in values too, right? Like there's lots of good things about religion. There's lots of good thing about Captain America, and I think they share more similarities than not. Don't you, Cap?
With that, I'm going to get my tweet. I'm going to get my tweet ready for you right now and finish. My episode of Falcon. and Winter Soldier.
God bless America, and God bless Captain America.
Brendan, it's a pleasure. Thanks for coming on the Pop Marketing Podcast, and we'll talk to you really soon, man.
Thank you, Joe, for having me. Appreciate it.